We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Exciting times here at Lions of Liberty. Of course, we've expanded our network in the past couple weeks here. We've added Lou Perez. You can hear the Lou Perez podcast every Tuesday here on Lions of Liberty. We've added Brian Nichols. You can hear the Brian Nichols Show every Thursday here on Lions of Liberty. And of course, on Monday, you get this show, Finding Freedom. And on Wednesday, you get our show with Brian McWilliams, Mean Age Daydream. And if that isn't enough, guys, that's 4 shows. That's a lot. That's a lot of shows. Every other Friday, you'll get our newest show, Politics. That's tick, like the blood-sucking insect. You'll get that delivered to your podcast feed as well. And if that's not enough, if you are a member of our Lions of Liberty Pride, if you're a patron over at Patreon or on Locals with Lions of Liberty, on the weeks you don't get Politics, you will get access to our longtime show, Meme Wars, where we'll have myself, Brian McWilliams, Brian Nichols, Lou Perez, official Lions of Liberty legal counsel Rico will make an appearance from time to time on Meme Wars to talk about memes trending in our news, to dive in and dabble with a little bit of comedy and culture on your way into the weekend. So be sure to join up over on Patreon or Locals to join the Lions of Liberty Pride. A lot of new bonus content coming in addition to Meme Wars as well. Exciting stuff, man. I've had some great conversations over the past week with potential sponsors, with some people maybe wanting to come on board to help out with production and marketing and things like that. So really, Lions of Liberty is becoming a full-blown media company here, right in front of your eyes. So we're excited for that. We're very excited. Today's episode is a solo show today, something that's been on my heart for a while, is to come to you all and share what I know and what I've researched about the coming need, the coming solution of small modular reactors to meet the energy needs in this country, and really, in reality, to avoid a significant energy crisis in this country. I do have a background in the nuclear power field. I worked for about 10 years for Westinghouse Nuclear, and I worked for, 2-3 years for NuScale, which is a leader in the small modular reactor world. So what I'm going to do on today's show, first, I'm just going to briefly outlay kind of what the current situation is, why small modular reactors are not only necessary, they're going to be vital for us to survive in this coming data and AI obsessed world, which, good or bad, right or wrong, it's what's coming, and the energy needs are going to be there, and they are there right now. So we'll lay that out, and then we'll talk about why really SMRs are the ideal solution to these energy needs. And then I'll go through, originally I was going to do 5 of the leading SMR developers. I think we might get through 7. There's even more than that. It's kind of a crazy competitive place with short and long-term winners, I think. at least potential winners. I think there's going to be more than one company that takes up this load, of course, worldwide. Several companies are going to be instrumental. Not every company I'm going to talk about today is going to be a winner. Some, of course, will lose out, or maybe be absorbed into other companies with acquisitions. But anyway, so let's lay this out here today. Let's lay it out. So by 2030, there's projected to be a 15% increase in the U.S. electrical grid. If you're keeping track at home, that is not very far from now. As we sit here today in May of 2025, that's less than 5 years away if you're keeping track at home. This is going to be driven by, this increased demand in electricity is going to be driven by data centers, cloud computing, all of those types of things. This manifests in a need for an additional 85 to 90 gigawatts of electricity. What does that mean, John? What the heck is a gigawatt? Well, let me tell you what a gigawatt is, my dear podcast listening friend. So a gigawatt is roughly equal to the power needed in order to power 750,000 homes. So if you're talking 85 to 90 gigawatts, then you're talking about roughly somewhere between 60 and 70 million homes needing to be powered. So when you get into the context of data centers, the only way to meet this need with a reliable baseload power, it's not going to be with solar. Solar's not reliable. Now, maybe you could say, okay, we could do it with solar if every house that gets enough solar exposure and sunlight, if every house switched over to solar and we switched that energy that's powering the electricity that's powering these homes away from homes, residential neighborhoods, and towards our commercial energy needs for data centers, then maybe we could do it. That would be, I don't even know if that's possible, but just thinking outside the box, maybe that would be a way to do it. But of course, you have large segments of the country that just don't get the solar necessary year-round constantly in order to provide enough power. Maybe with technology, maybe that changes over the years. I don't think it's going to change quickly enough. Wind is not reliable enough. Wind is actually horrible for the environment. Wind power kills tons of birds. These structures are enormous and require tremendous amounts of maintenance, and they look terrible as well to the landscape. So solar power, wind power don't provide the reliable baseload power, 24/7 power that data centers need. You can't have these issues with intermittent renewables where you have your power going up, power going down as the wind blows, as the sun shines. And then of course, when you get into your trying to persuade those on the left and the progressive side, when you start talking about climate change and sustainability, climate change being something that I really don't believe is a thing, but if you're trying to market to those people, and you do want to have a net zero company and move away from, fossil fuels, things like that, then of course, nuclear power is zero emissions. So for those people on the left that are swayed by that, there you go. There's your little golden nugget to take home and shove under your pillow and keep away the evil climate change demons. And then when it comes from, the perspective of the scalability and flexibility of nuclear power, particularly small modular reactors. So historically, traditionally, in the nuclear power world, you have a situation where you would build these very large nuclear power plants, and they would have around them a emergency planning zone, an EPZ zone, emergency planning zone. That's like a 10-mile radius. So within those 10 miles, you can't have any other industry within there. You can't have manufacturing or any other sort of industry that could benefit from the heat coming off of producing that nuclear power, getting the hydrogen piped off of there. That 10-mile radius really prevents a lot of those synergies from taking place. Now, when you get with small modular reactors, SMRs, you can shrink that EPZ zone way down. For example, NuScale, who we're going to be talking about here shortly, NuScale spelled N-U, capital S-C-A-L-E, NuScale Power, who I used to work for. They have an EPZ zone that is approved at the site boundary. And the NuScale site takes up about 35 acres. So you have a situation where you can build these sites, these small modular reactor sites, right next to either existing industry or build it and build industry around it, data centers, industry that would need and benefit from taking the heat in order for production and manufacturing. Lots of applications there. Also, aligning with fossil fuel production as well, needing heat or electricity for that. So there's tons of different ways to scale and tons of opportunities for flexibility within the small modular reactor space because of that. And I do have a comment here from Carl. Carl says thorium-232 and uranium-238 on the horizon. So I'll take the opportunity to say right now that although I've worked in this field, I am not a nuclear engineer. I'm not an expert in these designs. I know a little bit about each of the different designs. I've done research. And of course, the companies I work for, I know those designs a little bit better. But even working for those companies, that's not my specialty. I worked in risk management. So for the most part, working on a project and a portfolio risk management side, not digging into the technical risk management of what could go wrong, insofar as a technical risk could impact the ability to deliver projects and the ability to meet portfolio goals. So with that being said, I'll do my best to go through these. I'm not an expert. There's going to be things I miss. There's going to be things I probably get wrong, mispronounce, and make mistakes about. But with that being said, I think this will be a good baseline overview. And speaking of baselines, I think it's important just to get a baseline of, like what Carl talked about there, with the different types of reactors, just to give an overview of, what reactors there have been previously approved, most recently with Westinghouse down in Georgia with their AP1000, and of course, a few Westinghouse reactors approved over in China as well. And maybe different, UAE might have had one also. I can't remember, but definitely China, and of course the one in Georgia in the U.S. are the most recent Westinghouse reactors, AP1000s, that have been commissioned and are operating. So those types of reactors that Westinghouse put into commission are pressurized water reactors. So PWRs. What this means is the water is heated by the reactor core, but is kept under pressure to stay in liquid form. And then this hot water heats a separate loop, which then creates the steam. And then that steam goes into spinning turbines, which creates electricity. So essentially, all you're doing is boiling water to create electricity. Doing that repeatedly with these nuclear reactions. Similar design, but a little bit less safe, is a boiling water reactor. Probably won't see these put into service anytime soon again. Similar to a PWR, but a BWR boils the water directly in the reactor core, which makes steam, goes to the turbines, and spins the turbines, creates electricity. But you might get a little bit of radioactivity in that steam. Okay, next up would be and these next ones I know less and less about as we go through them, but I'll just I'll just read what I've learned. So a gas-cooled reactor, a GCR, uses a gas like helium to transfer heat from the core instead of using water. So this is often paired with graphite to control the reaction. These types of reactors can run at higher temperatures and can be much more efficient. Next type would be a fast neutron reactor, a FNR. And an FNR doesn't slow down neutrons like others do, can use more fuel efficiently, and can even burn nuclear waste. So for the reactors you've heard that can just consume nuclear waste and there's nothing left over, this is what we're talking about, an FNR. It's more complex and often uses a liquid metal like sodium for cooling. Then we have a molten salt reactor, a MSR. So this uses liquid salt mixed with fuel to carry the heat. Can be safer, more efficient, less waste. But to this point, from a regulatory standpoint, doesn't have the approvals. And because of that, it's viewed as mostly, being experimental, of course. And then within that, so you have all these different types of reactors, then SMRs, small modular reactors, it can be any type of technology. So there's going to be a mix. And when I go through the different companies and designs that I talk about, I'll briefly touch on the type of technology that they're using. Okay. Boom, going through these here. Let me get a quick sip of water before I go through this. So first, I'll list off the companies that we're going to talk about. No idea how long this is going to take. So we have NuScale Power. We have X Energy. We have Kairos Power. I believe I'm saying that correctly. We have Terra Power. Holtec International. And then we'll talk briefly about Oklo and Westinghouse as well. So 7 companies. I know there's more than that. And maybe we'll get to the other ones in a different podcast. But for the purposes of keeping this from going super long, we're going to keep it to those 7 companies. And let me say this too. So I'll be talking about each of these companies. I'll talk about the design, talk about some of the pros to the design and the different regulatory advantage some of these companies might have, maybe a funding advantage they might have. And I'll talk about some of the cons. So obviously, some of these companies are publicly traded. Some of these companies I've worked for. I am not going to mix anything that I know, which I don't even think there is anything that I know anymore. That is not now publicly available with any of these companies. So that being said, let's say that and also say none of this is financial advice. Absolutely zero of it. Nothing I say here should you take as advice to you and go as advice saying that you should go and invest money in any of these companies. What you should do, you should do your own research. You should talk to people who you trust and talk to a financial advisor. Okay, another note here from Carl. Okay, so Carl says the lithium fluoride adds passive safety as its property change if you melt down temperatures, as well as the freeze plug and bottom tank. Well, that's getting more technical than I was going to get, Carl, but that's good information. I'm sure as this podcast will make its rounds and some people who know much more than I do about these different designs. So thanks for that, Carl. I appreciate the added background there on what the lithium fluoride does. Okay, so NuScale Power. NuScale Power's design, it's called Voyager, VOYGR. And it features compact factory-built modules. They have a 6-pack, and I believe also, at least they were when I was there, they had a 12-pack that they offered. Now, the unique thing about the NuScale design is in scalability. The thought process was you could order, a couple or a few, and you could add on more modules over time as you need to produce more power. I'm not sure if that has come to fruition as different clients or discussions have happened, contracts have been made. But anyway, that was the idea from a scalability standpoint for NuScale. NuScale uses a light water reactor technology. So this is a PWR with passive safety systems, requires zero external power or operator action for safe shutdown. Very cool. And like I said, it's designed for scalability, simplified construction. The idea is that you are building all of this stuff in a either on site right there, or ideally you have a manufacturing building where you're building these modules and shipping them right to the site, either on rail or if you have to by barge, depending on the access and depending on where the site is. So with that being said, this design, the problem with nuclear in the past, one of the problems is designs changing and expanding and customers asking for different bells and whistles, and you don't get that modular design. The idea with NuScale is, and all of these companies really, is that you have the same design, you're building it the same, and you're shipping that you're shipping that product, you're shipping those modules to the site in order to be installed. The NuScale design is the only SMR that is certified by the US NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Another note from Carl here. A lot of these designs are extremely unsafe in a zero gravity environment. On Earth, they seem to do great, though. Well, that's good because we have gravity on Earth, right? That's a good thing. Okay, so talking about NuScale, some of the things that NuScale has going in its favor. Like I said, regulatory advantage. NuScale is very much farther ahead than their competitors with the NRC, with NRC approvals. The bottleneck, one of the bottlenecks with any nuclear design, is getting it through the NRC. And of course, you've had Congress pass some legislation recently, which in effect said, hey, NRC, move faster. It's just not that simple. I mean, you can't just tell the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to just do all of their reviews and everything faster to be more efficient. There's a resource constraint. There's resource constraints not only on the NRC side, there's resource constraints on the side of these different companies as they're slowly building up in order to respond, to the different questions and issues raised, and the back and forth between the NRC and these companies takes up a lot of time and resources as well. So it's a two-way street there. A second pro, though, for NuScale is the supply chain readiness. NuScale over the past few years here has built up a robust supply chain with different contracts, different partnerships with some movers in the industry. And keep in mind with nuclear, a lot of the supply chain does not exist because we haven't been building these plants since the 1980s or the 1990s. So we're talking about, a 35-year, 40-year gap where these types of things have not been produced. So the supply chain is just not there. So really your first step, you have your regulatory approvals, you have your supply chain readiness, your supply chain creation, and building mock-ups of these different pieces of equipment, making sure that these manufacturers are able to do it, manufacturing readiness reviews, all these different things. All of this costs money too, and a lot of this stuff costs money but doesn't make any money. So you can see sort of the problem in how do you get from point A to point B when you're not making any money. So that'll be kind of a theme throughout when we're talking about these. NuScale has a contract with Romania to build a six-pack of their design there with the target deployment date of 2029. And this year, I believe, it's expected to be their final investment decision to see if that project does move forward. That should happen before the end of the year. So some cons with NuScale. They did have a contract when I worked there with the Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, UAMPS, which was canceled in 2023. That was supposed to be the first project, the first U.S. build of a small modular reactor. That fell through. Really, I think the driver there, this is all public, was the demand wasn't there on the utility side to buy up the power at the price that it was going to be offered at. People talked about the increasing price. I think more so it was just that the buy-in wasn't there from the utilities, which has to do with price as well. Okay, so moving on. Next up is X Energy. X Energy. They have their XE100 is a Generation 4 high-temperature gas-cooled small modular reactor that uses helium coolant and TRISO, T-R-I-S-O, fuel pebbles to produce 80 megawatts per unit. I didn't say NuScale's is 77 megawatts per unit. There's the X Energy is scalable as well to a 320 megawatt fuel pack. So it's also has a passive safety system to ensure meltdown-proof operation, relies on natural physics for shutdown and cooling, and its modular road shippable design aims to reduce construction costs and timelines. Major pros for X Energy, they got the tech backing, man. Amazon has invested in X Energy and has agreements to deploy over 5 gigawatts of SMR capacity by 2039, including 4 reactors in Washington with Energy Northwest, and to provide substantial financial and market validation. Also, their fuel innovation. So X Energy's TRISO, I think I'm saying that right, the acronym T, I don't know what it stands for, TRISO, their X Fuel facility in Tennessee enhances its ability to produce the LEU fuel, which is critical for these advanced reactors. And the other thing with NuScale, well, you know what? I guess we will come. Yeah, we'll come back to NuScale for a minute here because I did miss a point here. So NuScale does one of their key benefits is they do use an already widely available low enriched uranium, LEU. And X Energy uses a less available an HALEU, which is critical for these advanced reactors. So I told you there's certain things that I'm just not an expert in. And when you're talking about different types of fuel, it's not something I know a ton about. So I'll kind of talk about a little bit what I know, but I'm sure someone else could go into much more detail. Just important to know that the fuel being used here for X Energy, they've mitigated some of the risk here by having that facility in Tennessee, but the type of fuel they're using is not as readily available. So that being a major con with X Energy is a reliance on this HALEU, HALEU, I guess people would say the acronym, which could face limitations for their supply, could delay projects if the production does not scale quickly. And, their commercial timelines, like I talked about in the top here, talking about 2039, X Energy seems to me like a much longer play than a company like NuScale. They do have these contracts in place with Amazon. They got some financial backing, but it seems like it's going to take more time for this to play out for X Energy. Seems like a very strong design, strong technology, but going to take more time to play out because from a regulatory standpoint, it's not there, and just a design like this doesn't exist in practice. Okay, next up, Kairos Power. So Kairos Power's KP FHR standing for Fluoride High Temperature Reactor. It's a small modular reactor that uses molten fluoride salt as a coolant. and triso fuel pebbles to produce up to 140 megawatts per unit. So, like the other designs we've talked about, you'll notice a theme here: passive safety, right? The design emphasizes passive safety, leveraging the inherent properties of salt coolant and ceramic fuel for meltdown proof operation with a focus on simplified construction and cost reduction. Noticing themes: passive safety, simplified construction, cost reduction. All of these designs have those three things in common. Okay, so the pros for Kairos Power, their Google partnership. Google has committed to power its AI data centers with Kairos SMR starting in 2030. Seems like an aggressive timeline, which of course this signals some super strong demand from Google. This deal is a market signal. When this deal was signed, all the nuke stocks went way up. People made a lot of money. Even if it wasn't Kairos Power, just the industry overall went up. So this technology, it's innovative. So they use the molten fluoride salt as coolant, which offers enhanced safety and efficiency compared to traditional water-cooled reactors. So now this could appeal to regulators, right? Because these are good things overall from a safety and efficiency standpoint, but it hasn't been approved yet. So there's a huge hurdle there. So it's kind of a pro and a con that point there, as until you get through the approvals, and the NRC with a new technology is going to take longer to get through approvals than a technology which has already been approved that NuScale is using in a light water reactor, which is the same technology used in Westinghouse's AP1000, just shrunk way down and smaller, essentially. So the other thing with Kairos, which is interesting, is they've begun construction on a demonstration reactor, which is backed by the Department of Energy, with a target operational date before 2030. So that's interesting. In that they have government backing, and they are building an actual reactor, which is pretty cool. Okay, next up, another point from Carl here. We were talking about gravity before. If gravity stops working, we've got a lot more problems than just the nuclear plant. I would agree with that. I would agree with that, Carl. Thank God for gravity. Let's keep gravity working. All right, next up, TerraPower. This is Bill Gates' little baby, right? So TerraPower, their Natrium reactor is a 345 megawatt sodium cooled fast reactor paired with a molten salt energy storage system, allowing it to boost output to 500 megawatts for over 5.5 hours to support variable renewable energy grids. That's interesting. So this Natrium reactor uses metallic uranium fuel. Here it comes. Passive safety features. Notice the theme. Relying on natural forces like gravity. There's that gravity again. And convection for cooling, which enhances safety and reduces costs. The design is factory fabricated for scalability, targeted for commercial operation by 2030 in Wyoming. So just one note, just overall on passive cooling. If you remember Fukushima, Japan, the earthquake, the tsunami that occurred, which happened with that power plant, the nuclear fallout, the nuclear meltdown, which all stemmed from the safety systems there were not passive. If they just would have had their generators up on top of the building and off the ground, those reactors would not have melted down. So when there is a lot of pushback still to nuclear power, but the pushback really should be, we need to get these new projects approved because they're safe, because they're passively cooled, and because a lot of them don't require any operator intervention in order to initiate shutdown. So we should be replacing these older reactors with worse technology from the 1970s with technology from today, from the 2020s and beyond, and things that are actually passive safety systems. That should be what people who are scared of nuclear are talking about. Okay, on with TerraPower. TerraPower, big pro for them. They've raised over $1 billion in private funding and $2 billion from the DOE. This is obviously significant resources that's going to help them to overcome possibly their first-of-a-kind build costs. This financial stability supports their ambitious coal to nuclear power project in Wyoming. They are transforming a previously coal power plant into a nuclear power plant in Wyoming. Energy storage innovation. The Natrium Reactors molten salt storage allows it to adjust output, which is super interesting. Which, I don't know how much data centers vary in their energy demand. Maybe they do. It doesn't really make sense that they would, but it allows for that flexibility as the loads would change for necessary power. And then strategic partnerships, also important one. TerraPower's collaboration with GE Hitachi and BWS Technologies leverages established nuclear expertise and, will help with execution, most likely. Cons for TerraPower. Faces the challenges of uranium fuel sourcing and regulatory approvals for their first-of-a-kind sodium-cooled design, which I think is going to make it pretty darn difficult to make that 2030 target. I'm just a guy, though, watching from the sidelines. Don't take my word for it. But to me, 2030 sounds insane. Okay, next up, Holtec. Holtec's design. Holtec has a SMR 300 that is a pressurized light water reactor. So similar, very similar to NuScale there and to Westinghouse. That produces 300 megawatts. It's designed with passive safety systems that rely on gravity and natural circulation. Noticing the theme. Requires zero external power or operator intervention for safe shutdown. Same theme. So very similar to NuScale in that. So it's modular factory-built components and underground reactor placement, enhanced safety. NuScale's is also underwater, actually. The nuclear power modules, NPMs, and NuScale are all submerged underwater. So there's no water that needs to be added in order to shut down. The design incorporates proven light water reactor technology and on-site spent fuel storage for its 80-year lifespan. Okay, so pros. Major investment. $10 billion commitment from the IHC to build an SMR fleet, or I should say from IHC, not the IHC, starting at Palisades. So that's up in Michigan, I believe. So this is massive for Holtec. Having the capital, like I talked about with building out supply chains, doing manufacturing tests, manufacturing readiness, all of these different things, testing your components, massive to have this commitment for Holtec. So this absolutely will help with deployment and will help to attract data center clients seeking regional power solutions. So another pro for Holtec, strategic site selection. Holtec has the plan to repurpose the Palisades nuclear plant. They have that existing infrastructure there, which helped them to reduce costs. And also with regulatory hurdles, since that site has already been approved. Plus, Michigan, it is in Michigan. Michigan pro-nuclear policy environment further supports rapid deployment. All right. Holtec also talking about strategic partnerships. Has partnerships with Hyundai Engineering and Construction for a 10 gigawatt SMR fleet in North America, combined with international interest, positions them as a global player. What's the con for Holtec? Holtec's SMR 300, less advanced in the regulatory approval process than NuScale. Pretty far behind, I believe. And if it's a much larger reactor size, lacks the flexibility of maybe smaller data center applications. And because of its size, it's going to be a larger EPZ, a larger emergency planning zone. I don't know to what degree. I don't know the details that much. So kind of might limit a little bit the use, what kind of industry, data centers, manufacturing that you can have around one of these Holtec nuclear plants. Now, actually, I'll wait until I get through everything, and then I'll go back and kind of talk about some of these where I see maybe things fleshing out in the marketplace. We're only 40 minutes in. You're still with me, right? Okay, next I want to talk about Oklo. Oklo's design is called the Aurora Powerhouse. It's a liquid metal-cooled, metal-fueled fast reactor design to produce between 15 and 75 megawatts. So, of course, this is good use for data centers, industrial sites, military bases. They aim to deploy their first commercial plant at the Idaho National Laboratory by late 2027 or 2028. That agreement was signed pretty recently, I believe. Okay, some things that Oklo is going in their favor. Oklo went public in May 2024. NuScale also public via a SPAC merger. They raised $306 million. And Sam Altman, so Sam Altman from OpenAI, he stepped down as chairman of Oklo in April 2025 to avoid conflicts with OpenAI in these any data center energy talks. Regulatory and deployment momentum. Oklo's site use permit, fuel access, and DOE-approved fuel facility design give it the most regulatory traction among the advanced fission developers, so among these new technology. Its 2027 deployment target, backed by the Idaho National Laboratory collaboration and streamlined licensing, positions it to potentially meet and positions it potentially for early market entry, especially considering this first of a kind design. Also, very important, Chris Wright, the current United States Energy Secretary, is a former board member of Oklo. Nice to have people in high places in your corner. Cons for Oklo. So their fast reactor technology, well proven with 400 reactor years globally, faces regulatory hurdles, of course, due to it, not being a light water reactor design. So, of course, it's probably going to take more time for their design to get through and overcome the regulatory hurdles, of course, and they have the same issues with fuel, with their HALEU fuel potential supply constraints and initial costs to build up that supply chain. All right, next up, lastly, Westinghouse, another one of my former employers, worked there a long time ago. I worked on their AP1000 projects in China and domestically. So their SMR design is called the AP300. It's a 300 megawatt pressurized water reactor. They also have a much smaller micro reactor, which is a 5 megawatt heat pipe reactor. And either one of them could be used for data centers. I think the micro reactor would be more for maybe military use or space use, possibly. Pros for Westinghouse, they've done this before. They have the global supply chain. They have the partnerships. They have the fuel supply chain built out. They have all that. They've done it. They're a proven technology base. Their AP1000 relies on the AP1000 components. The AP1000 is already in service in China and Georgia. So that minimizes right there any technical or regulatory risks, which is pretty massive. Cons for the Westinghouse AP300, it's bigger, 300 megawatts, similar to the cons with Holtec. So less flexible for data centers compared to its micro reactor, which could work for data centers, but isn't even enough energy. And Westinghouse isn't on at the same place that NuScale is with regulatory approvals. They're behind as well with their AP3000. So when it comes down to it, you've a couple different categories. We'll say two different categories here to make it simple. You have Westinghouse, you have Holtec, and you have NuScale, which use proven, regulatory approved light water reactor technology. You have NuScale, which is furthest ahead from a regulatory standpoint with their SMR Voyager technology. On the other side of it, you have X Energy, Kairos Power, TerraPower, and Oklo, who are using different types of new nuclear technology, which has not been approved, but some of them have tremendous funding. Some of them have tremendous private funding, like a TerraPower, and well, they also have DOE. TerraPower also has DOE funding. They have both, and yeah, so it's tough. It's tough when you look at this marketplace to really pick winners and losers. So I'm not going to do that. I will say NuScale's out in front. Their technology is farthest along in the approval process. That being said, they don't have the contracts in place that some of these other companies do. NuScale does have the contract with Romania. They have a contract with Standard Power, which I haven't heard really anything about recently. That contract was for data centers in Ohio and Pennsylvania. But it's not like a formal contract, at least I don't think. It's like an exploratory contract. Could be wrong in the way I'm saying that. But yeah, I mean, so NuScale's out in front, but NuScale doesn't have the funding. NuScale is publicly traded. They've been able to raise money because they are publicly traded. But when you look at some of these other companies that are just flush with capital, X Energy has Amazon backing them. Kairos Power has Google backing them. TerraPower has $1 billion in private funding, $2 billion DOE funding. Holtec has $10 billion from IHC to build that SMR fleet. Oklo is publicly listed, has Sam Altman. I don't know if he's funding it in some way, but they're connected that way. And then Westinghouse has done this all before with the AP1000. So it's really hard to pick winners and losers. Like would I, and not all of these are publicly traded, but from a trading standpoint, I diversify because I have no idea which one of these companies is going to make it and which ones are going to break it. You know, I mean, and I don't think anybody does. Like when you have things like you have Oklo, who has the current U.S. Energy Secretary, who used to be a board member of Oklo. When you have Bill Gates involved, when you have all this private funding, when you have DOE funding, when you have the Trump administration saying that they want to fast track funding. Google just had an agreement with Elemental, which is not a technology company, but a company that is going to help to build these reactors. Elemental's CEO used to be NuScale's CFO. So you start looking into this industry, and it's pretty wild, man. I mean, to see how this is going to shake out. The one thing I do know is it's 100% necessary. Small modular reactors are necessary. They will be built. I think as an investor, I've already made a lot of money investing in some of these companies. I'm not giving advice. If you don't want to do research, if you don't want to look into it, don't invest. Invest in stuff that you know. But I think it's just important from the standpoint, it's important to recognize from the standpoint of the need for power that is coming. I think 15% increase is probably very conservative. The need for power is going to be tremendous, and it's coming fast. 15% by 2030 could be higher. What is it by 2035? What's it by 2040, 2050? We're looking at unprecedented data demands that we can't even imagine. I said at the start of the show, maybe not all these companies will make it. They might all be needed, honestly. in order to meet power demands. This industry is ripe to go bonkers, man, with these companies really playing an important role in securing our energy future, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. And there's competitors outside of the US that are doing great things as well. Canada, Europe. So I didn't go through everybody, but this gives you a taste of the different small modular reactor players. And one last note from Carl. Carl, thanks for chiming in over on Facebook. I'm glad that we still broadcast there. Sometimes I forget to. Carl says, if you put the same radiation regulations on other energy sources, you wouldn't have geothermal, rare earth mining for solar power and windmills, coal and natural gas. Mining releases a bunch of radiation. That's true. A lot of people don't realize that. Even flying, you're getting exposed to regulation. Even eating a banana. Did you know that bananas give off radiation? So I think there's a huge misconception around nuclear safety. If you just research like the number of people that have died in nuclear accidents, it's not many at all compared to the people who have died in every other type of field: oil, natural gas, wind energy, solar. When I first started working in energy, one of the first training courses I had, the gentleman said to me, actually, this is when I was working in oil and gas, so it was in the middle of my career. The gentleman said to our class, any type of energy, anything you're going to do, you're trying to tame a river to build a dam for I want to say hydroponic power. That's not right. I can't think of the right term. Anyway, for power from water, you're trying to build a dam. Anything you're doing, oil and gas, you're drilling for oil, you're drilling for minerals, drilling for gas. You're creating massive windmills, create their own issues and kill birds and are terrible for the environment. Or nuclear reactors, constructing these. Anything you're doing, you're going to break a few eggs. You're creating power, creating electricity that's going to power the way that we live today. It's tough. It's messy. Things can go wrong. We're getting smarter. We're getting better. We're getting safer, though. You notice the themes today. Hydroelectric power. Why couldn't I think of that? Hydroelectric power. Anyway, geez. Too much research going through recently getting ready for this show. You notice the themes: passive safety, shutting down without operator intervention. A lot of these designs are actually underground or underwater already, not needing to add water in order to shut down. With the newer designs, more efficient, a little bit safer. So the direction the nuclear power is going into is going to change the way that we live. And whether you like AI, whether you think it's the end of the world, the direction we're going towards as a civilization, if you want to have energy in order to turn your AC on, in order to use your microwave, or even to watch this show, you need nuclear power. And if you have a hesitancy with it, if you think it's unsafe, I really encourage you to go out and do your own research. You will quickly find out these new designs are incredibly safe, safer than any operating plant that we currently have. With that being said, guys, I will leave it there for today's show. Please support the show. As I choke on something, a drink of water. Please support the show. Subscribe on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen. Subscribe on YouTube, Rumble. Share it with a friend. And join the Lions of Liberty Pride. We'll see you over on Patreon or on Locals. Check it out. And I'll see y'all next week. In the meantime, guys, always remember to keep your head up and those fires of liberty burning.